You're 46 years old. You've done everything right. College degree, steady job, a mortgage you've paid on time for 11 years. And last week, in a meeting that lasted maybe 9 minutes, someone younger than your own son told you that your department is being restructured around new technology. You smiled. You nodded. You said you understood. You didn't understand anything. You went home that night and sat in your car in the driveway for 20 minutes before you could walk inside, because you didn't know how to say it out loud yet. Not to your spouse, not to yourself. Here's what nobody tells you. This isn't really about artificial intelligence. It's about whether the story you were told, work hard, stay loyal, retire with dignity, was ever true to begin with. Tonight, we're going to look at that story honestly. No panic, no false comfort either. Just the truth and what to do with it. Because somewhere between the fear and the shame, there's a decision waiting for you. And that decision is still yours to make. Let's start with the question you actually came here to ask. Not will AI take jobs? You already know it will. The real question, the one sitting in your chest at 2 a.m, is simpler and crueler. Is it going to take mine? So let's answer it. Honestly, there are 5 categories of work that are already being hollowed out, quietly, while most people are still arguing about whether this is even real. I'm not going to give you a list of job titles to panic over, because titles change. I'm going to give you something more useful. The pattern underneath them. The first pattern is repetition without judgment. If your job involves doing the same evaluation, the same calculation, the same document review, thousands of times a year, with very little personal judgment required, that work is exposed. Insurance claims processors, basic bookkeeping, first-pass legal document review, data entry that used to require a human pair of eyes and now requires a trained model and a few seconds. The second pattern is information retrieval and summary. If your value has been, I know where to find the answer and I can explain it to you, that value is shrinking fast. Research assistance, some paralegal work, entry-level financial analysis that's really just pulling numbers into a template. The third pattern is scheduling and coordination. The person who used to be the human glue between departments, moving information from one desk to another. A lot of that glue is now software. The fourth is basic customer-facing scripts, not relationships, scripts. If your job is reading from a decision tree to solve a common problem, that decision tree now runs itself, at any hour, without a coffee break. And the fifth, this one surprises people, is entry-level creative production. Not creative direction, not taste. Production. The person who used to spend 6 hours making a version of something someone else already imagined. Now here's what I want you to notice. None of those 5 patterns are about intelligence. They're about repetition, retrieval, coordination, scripts, and production. What they have in common is that a machine can do them without understanding them. That distinction matters more than anything else I'm going to tell you tonight. Because here's the thing, nobody in the tech world wants to say plainly. Artificial intelligence is extraordinary at pattern completion. It is still remarkably bad at judgment under uncertainty, at reading a room, at knowing when the rule should be broken, at carrying responsibility for a decision that affects a real person's life. It doesn't worry. It doesn't lose sleep. And strangely, That's exactly why it can't yet do the parts of work that require someone who does. I think about my own father here. He spent 31 years in manufacturing. And when automation came for his industry in the 80s and 90s, it didn't take every job. It took the repetitive ones. What survived, what actually got paid more over time, were the people who could troubleshoot when the machine broke. The people who understood why, not just how. That's not a comforting fairy tale. Real people lost real jobs in that transition, and some of them never fully recovered financially. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, because you've lived long enough to smell false comfort from a mile away. But here's what's true, and it's worth sitting with. Every wave of automation in history has destroyed categories of labor, and at the same time, made human judgment more valuable, not less. The question was never, will machines replace humans? The question has always been, which humans, doing which kind of work, become more valuable when the routine parts disappear. So before we go further, I want you to do something. Not later. Right now, while you're listening. Take an honest inventory of your own work week. Not your job title. Your actual week. How much of it is repetition without judgment? How much of it is retrieval and summary? And how much of it is the kind of decision that requires you, specifically, with your years, your context, your relationships, your instinct for what matters? That ratio is the real number you need to know. Not whether your industry will be affected. Every industry will be affected. The number that matters is what percentage of your actual week is replaceable and what percentage is irreplaceably you. We're going to come back to that number, because it's going to shape everything about the financial plan I'm going to walk you through tonight. I know some of you are thinking, easy for you to say, you're not 52 with 2 kids in college and a job that's mostly spreadsheets. I hear that. I'm not minimizing it. The worst financial mistake you can make right now isn't staying in a job that's partially exposed. It's staying there without a plan, pretending the ground isn't shifting, and waking up one day with no runway and no strategy. Only shock. Shock is expensive. Preparation is not. That difference is decided by what you do in the coming months, not by some technology timeline 5 years out. That part is entirely yours. Let me tell you about a man named Robert. Not his real name, but a real story. One I heard almost word for word from a viewer who wrote to me last year. Robert spent 26 years at the same insurance company. Started in the mailroom, worked his way up to underwriting, the kind of career that used to be called a good, stable job. He had a title. He had a parking spot with his name painted on it. He had, in his words, made peace with being a company man. Then, over 18 months, his department shrank from 40 people to 11. Not because anyone did anything wrong, because the software got better than the process, and the process was most of what Robert did. Here's the part that stuck with me. Robert didn't say he was angry at the technology. He said he was angry at himself for believing a job title was the same thing as security. For 26 years, he told me, he thought the company was his safety net. It turned out the company was never the net. It was just a very comfortable illusion of one. I want you to sit with that distinction, because it's the single most important shift in thinking you need to make tonight. Your employer is not your safety net. It never was. It was a source of income that could disappear for 100 different reasons, and technology is simply the newest one on that list. Companies get sold. Industries get disrupted. Managers get replaced and take their favorites with them. Your paycheck was always more fragile than it felt. The actual safety net, the real one, is something only you can build. It's made of 3 things: liquid savings, diversified income, and skills that transfer. Let's talk about the first one honestly, because I think financial advisors have made this sound more complicated than it needs to be. Liquid savings means money you can access without penalty, without selling a house, without cashing out a retirement account and paying the tax consequences. The old rule was 3 to 6 months of expenses. I want you to think in a different unit of time right now. Not months. Runway. If your income stopped tomorrow, how many mornings could you wake up and pay your mortgage, buy your groceries, keep your health insurance, without panic? For most Americans over 40, when they actually do this math, instead of guessing, the number is smaller than they expected. And that gap between what you think your runway is and what it actually is, that gap is where fear lives. Not the AI headlines, the gap. So here's the first concrete thing I want you to do this week. Calculate your true monthly baseline, not your lifestyle spending, your baseline survival spending, and divide your liquid savings by that number. Whatever number comes out, write it down. That's your real runway, in months, today. If that number is under 3, that's not a moral failing. It's information. Most people your age carry a mortgage, college tuition, aging parents, or all 3 at once. Life doesn't leave room for a fat emergency fund. I'm not here to shame you for where you are. I'm here to help you see it clearly, because you cannot fix what you refuse to measure. The second piece, diversified income, is where most people over 40 get uncomfortable, because it sounds like I'm telling you to become an entrepreneur at 51. And that's not what I mean. Diversification doesn't require quitting your job. It requires that your household stops depending on exactly one source of money. That could be a spouse's income being genuinely separate from yours. Not the same employer, not the same industry, not exposed to the same risk. It could be a small, boring, unglamorous side income that has nothing to do with your main career. Consulting a few hours a month in your area of expertise, renting out something you already own, freelance work in the specific skill that made you valuable at your job in the first place. It doesn't need to replace your salary. It needs to exist, because the psychological and financial difference between 0 secondary income and even $400 a month of secondary income is enormous. One is total dependency. The other is the beginning of control. And the third piece, transferable skills, is where we're going to spend real time together in the blocks ahead, because this is where most people either save themselves or talk themselves out of trying. Robert, by the way, I'll finish his story briefly because you deserve to know how it turned out. He didn't get his old job back. He didn't want it back. He used the severance, the runway he'd actually built without realizing it, and 6 months of very uncomfortable learning to move into a role auditing the same AI systems that had replaced his department. He now makes more than he did before. Not because he beat the machine, because he learned to stand next to it instead of underneath it. That's not a guarantee for everyone listening. But it's proof the story isn't finished the moment the meeting happens. The meeting is just when you find out the old plan is over. What happens after is still entirely up to you. Let's talk about the 3 skills that don't show up on any resume template, but that I believe will matter more over the next 10 years than anything you learned in school. I want to be honest with you about something first. Every video on the internet promising you the skills AI can't replace gives you the same recycled list: creativity, empathy, critical thinking, and then moves on without ever explaining what those words actually mean in practice on a Tuesday at your actual job. That's not useful. That's a slogan. So let's go deeper than the slogan. The first skill is judgment under incomplete information. Here's what I mean. A machine, even a very good one, makes decisions based on patterns it has seen before. You make decisions based on patterns you've seen before, plus something it doesn't have. The weight of consequence. You know what it feels like when a decision goes wrong. You felt the cost of being wrong about a person, a deal, a diagnosis, a hire. That felt cost changes how you weigh a decision the next time in ways that are almost impossible to fully write down as a rule. Think about the last time you had to make a call with only 60% of the information you wanted. Maybe it was whether to trust a business partner. Maybe it was deciding to sign off on a project that wasn't quite ready, because waiting any longer would cost more than the risk of moving forward. That kind of decision, the kind where the correct answer doesn't exist yet, where you're weighing incomplete data against real consequences for real people, that is not a skill you can prompt your way into. It's built from years of being wrong and surviving it. It's built from every mistake you've already paid for. That's the part that should change how you feel about your age tonight. Every hard year you've lived, every layoff you've survived, every bad boss, every business decision that didn't pan out. None of it was wasted. It was tuition. Most 25-year-olds and every current AI model haven't paid that tuition yet. The second skill is trust built over time, which is different from being likable. Anyone can be pleasant in a single conversation. Trust is what happens after someone has watched you handle pressure, keep a promise you didn't have to keep, tell them something true when a lie would have been easier. That's not a transaction. It's a track record, and a track record cannot be generated. It can only be lived. This matters enormously in work that involves money, health, family, and risk, which, not coincidentally, is most of the highest paid work that still requires a human. People don't want an algorithm managing their family's estate plan when the stakes are their children's future. They want someone who has proven over years that they can be trusted with something that matters. If you've built that kind of trust in your field, with clients, colleagues, a community, you're sitting on an asset no software update can copy. Most people don't think of trust as a financial asset. It is one. It might be your most valuable one. The third skill is the ability to hold two people's competing needs in your head at once and find a way through. Negotiation, mediation, leadership, sales, therapy, teaching, parenting, every one of those at its core is the same skill wearing a different uniform. It's not persuasion. Persuasion is one-directional. This is something more delicate, understanding what someone actually needs, even when what they're saying isn't quite it, and building a bridge between that and what's realistically possible. I've watched AI try to do this in customer service scripts, and it fails the same way every time. It can respond to what you typed. It cannot sense what you didn't say, what you're too proud or too scared to say directly. You can. You've been doing it your whole life, probably without ever naming it, with your kids, your spouse, difficult coworkers, aging parents. That instinct is not soft. It's one of the rarest, most economically valuable things a human being can offer another. Now, here is where I want to be very direct with you, because I don't believe in giving you inspiration without instruction. Having these 3 skills isn't enough on its own. You have to make them visible. Most people your age have judgment, trust, and the ability to navigate people, and they've never once described those things as skills on a resume, in an interview, or in a conversation about a raise. You've been undervaluing the very things that are about to become the most valuable things you own. That has to change, starting this week, not someday. Write down, tonight if you can, 3 real moments. Actual situations, not vague qualities, where your judgment prevented a costly mistake, where someone trusted you with something they couldn't trust to just anyone, where you found a way through a conflict that looked unsolvable on paper. Those 3 stories are worth more in an interview, a client pitch, or a negotiation than any list of software you know how to use. Learn to tell them plainly, without bragging and without shrinking. That's not self-promotion. That's finally putting a price tag on something you've been giving away for free your entire career. Now I want to walk you through what I'd actually do, step by step, if I lost my income to automation tomorrow. Not theory. A real sequence. The order I'd move in. Because panic makes people do things in the wrong order. And the order matters as much as the actions themselves. The first thing I would not do is panic apply to 50 jobs in a week. I know that sounds like the opposite of what a financial video should tell you, but hear me out. Panic applying signals desperation, and desperation is something employers and clients can smell from across a table. It also wastes your most valuable resource in a crisis, which isn't money. It's clear thinking. So step 1, before anything else, is to stop the bleeding, not chase the cure. Stopping the bleeding means an honest, unemotional look at your monthly obligations and separating them into 3 categories: essential, negotiable, and optional. Essential is housing, food, insurance, minimum debt payments. Negotiable is the gym membership you can pause, the subscriptions you forgot you had, the car payment you might be able to refinance. Optional is everything else. Most people, when they actually do this exercise instead of estimating it in their head, find they can cut 15 to 25% of their monthly spend within a week without touching their quality of life in any way that matters. That's not a sacrifice. That's runway you just bought yourself, for free, using information you already had. Step 2 is triage your existing accounts before you touch a single long-term investment. This is where I see people make the most expensive mistakes. When fear hits, the instinct is to liquidate everything, including retirement accounts, which come with tax penalties and, worse, permanently remove you from decades of compound growth, right when you need that growth the most. Before you touch a 401k or an IRA, exhaust every other option. A home equity line if you have real equity and a real plan to repay it. A personal loan at a reasonable rate if your credit supports it. Negotiating payment plans directly with creditors who would almost always rather work with you than lose the account entirely. Retirement funds should be the last resort, not the first reflex, because the machine you use to protect your future in a crisis should not be the same machine you're trying to protect. Step 3, and this is the one most people skip because it feels less urgent than it is. File for unemployment immediately if you're eligible, the same week, not the same month. I've talked to people who waited out of pride, thinking they'd find something fast and wouldn't need it. Weeks of eligible benefits, gone, out of embarrassment. There is no dignity lost in using a system you paid into for exactly this situation. The dignity is in providing for your family using every legitimate tool available to you. Step 4 is where the real work begins, and it's the step people want to skip straight to, which is why I put it fourth instead of first. Take the inventory of transferable skills we talked about earlier. The judgment, the trust, the ability to navigate people, and translate it into language that a new employer or client in a slightly different industry can immediately understand. This is not about becoming a completely different person. It's about repackaging the value you've spent decades building so that it's legible outside the narrow context of your old job title. Here's a practical example. If you spent 20 years managing a sales team, you didn't just manage a sales team. You forecasted under uncertainty. You resolved conflict between people competing for the same resources. You made judgment calls about who to trust with major accounts. Every one of those is a skill that transfers directly into operations, into account management, into consulting, into industries that have nothing to do with your old one on paper, but everything to do with it underneath. Step 5 is the one nobody talks about enough. Build one new, small, income-producing skill in parallel while you're doing all of the above. Not a full career pivot. One skill, narrow and practical, that the market is currently paying for, that you could learn well enough to be useful in 8 to 12 weeks. This isn't about becoming an expert. It's about creating a second small stream of income fast enough to matter, while the bigger search continues in the background. And step 6, the one I want you to remember longest after this video ends. Tell people. Not everyone, but the people in your life who know your work, who've seen what you're capable of. Most opportunities after 40 don't come from job boards. They come from someone who already trusts you, remembering you exist at the exact moment they need what you offer. Silence protects your pride for about a week. It costs you months of opportunity after that. None of these 6 steps require you to be young or fearless or lucky. They require you to move in order, calmly, while other people are still frozen. That's the entire advantage. Not speed for its own sake. Sequence. Most financial disasters aren't caused by a lack of resources. They're caused by good resources, used in the wrong order, under panic, before anyone stopped to think. Now I want to talk about the conversation almost nobody has out loud. The one that keeps people your age up at night in a different way than the job worry does. Your retirement savings. Because losing a job is frightening. But it's a wound that can heal. What scares people more, quietly, privately, is the thought that the thing they've been building for 30 years, the 401k, the pension, the plan to finally stop working at 65, might be sitting on ground that's shifting in ways they don't fully understand. Let's talk about this honestly, because most of the content out there on this topic is either fear-mongering that sells you gold coins or blind optimism that tells you not to worry about anything. Neither one respects you enough to just tell you the truth. Here's the truth. Automation and artificial intelligence are already reshaping the market in ways that will directly touch your retirement account. Whether you notice it happening or not, entire sectors are being repriced as investors try to guess who wins and who gets left behind in this transition. Some of the companies in your index fund right now are the ones building the technology. Some are the ones being disrupted by it. If your portfolio hasn't been reviewed in the last few years with this specific lens, you may be more exposed than you realize in either direction. too concentrated in the disruptors, riding a wave that could turn violently, or too concentrated in industries that are quietly being hollowed out from underneath their stock price. This isn't a call to panic and restructure your entire portfolio tomorrow based on a YouTube video. It's a call to actually look. Most people haven't opened their 401k statement in over a year. They know the number went up or down a little, but they couldn't tell you what's actually inside it, what sectors it's concentrated in, what it would do to their retirement date if the market dropped 20% in the next 18 months. The specific danger for people over 40 is what financial planners call sequence of returns risk. And I want to explain it simply, because it's the single most under-discussed threat in a moment like this one. If a market downturn happens early in your working years, you have decades to recover. If a downturn happens right as you're retiring, or right after a job loss forces you to start drawing down savings earlier than planned, the damage is far more permanent. You're not just losing paper value. You're locking in that loss by being forced to sell at the bottom to cover living expenses. Two people can have the exact same average return over 30 years and end up in completely different financial positions, purely because of when the bad years happened to them. This is why the timing of a job loss matters so much more than people realize. It's not just about replacing income. It's about protecting the sequence of your entire financial life from being disrupted at the worst possible moment. If you're forced to draw from retirement accounts during a downturn because you have no other runway, you're not just having a bad year. You could be permanently reshaping your retirement in a way that's very hard to undo later, even after the market recovers. So here is what I actually want you to do. This week, not eventually. Pull up your retirement statement, not to panic, to look. Understand what percentage is in cash or cash equivalents versus market-exposed investments, because that ratio is your buffer against exactly the scenario I just described. A job loss coinciding with a downturn. If that buffer feels thin given everything we've talked about tonight, that's worth a real conversation with a fee-only fiduciary advisor, someone who's paid to work for you, not to sell you a product. I also want to say something that might be uncomfortable. If you're within 10 years of the retirement age you had planned, the honest, unglamorous move right now might be shifting some risk out of aggressive growth and into stability, even if it means slightly lower returns in a good year. That's not giving up on growth. That's protecting the years you can't afford to lose. Because you don't have 30 more years left to recover from a bad one, the way a 28-year-old does. None of this is about fear for its own sake. It's about looking at the whole picture. Your income, your savings, your timeline. As one connected system, instead of 3 separate worries you deal with separately. At 3 in the morning, alone. I think that's actually the deepest shift I want you to make tonight. Not a spreadsheet shift, a framing shift. Your career and your portfolio were never 2 different stories. They were always one story, told in 2 different accounts. And for the first time in a long time, both chapters are being rewritten at once, by forces neither of us fully controls. The only honest response to that is not fear. It's attention. Real, sustained, unglamorous attention. The kind that doesn't make for a dramatic headline, but quietly changes the outcome of your next 10 years. If you're still here with me at this point in the video, I want to say something before we keep going. Because it matters to me more than the algorithm does. You didn't have to stay. You could have clicked away the moment this got uncomfortable, the way most people do. The second a video stops flattering them and starts asking something of them. You didn't. That tells me something about you. It tells me you're the kind of person who'd rather sit with a hard truth than hide from it. And honestly, that's rarer than it used to be. So if you're here, and this is landing somewhere real, I'd genuinely appreciate it if you subscribed to the channel and stuck around. Not because I need the number to go up, because I make these videos for exactly the person still watching right now. And I'd like to keep having this conversation with you week after week, as all of this keeps unfolding. Because it will keep unfolding. And you deserve someone walking through it with you instead of shouting headlines at you from a distance. Here's something I've noticed, making these videos for people your age. The comment sections don't read like other financial channels. There's no bravado in them. No one pretending they've got it all figured out. Just people, quietly, in their own words, saying some version of the same thing. I'm scared, and I don't know who else to say that to. If that describes you tonight, drop a word in the comments about what's actually weighing on you. Not for likes, just so the person reading it after you knows they're not the only one. If that's you right now, I want you to know you're not behind. You're not late. You're not the only one lying awake doing this math in your head. There's an entire generation of people exactly your age, right now, tonight, having the exact same conversation with themselves that you're having. The only difference between the ones who come out the other side stronger and the ones who don't isn't intelligence. And it isn't luck. It's whether they kept moving instead of freezing. So let's keep moving. Because there's one more piece of this I haven't told you yet, and I think it might be the most important one. Everything we've covered tonight, the exposure, the safety net, the skills, the 6-step plan, the retirement risk, all of it assumes a defensive posture. Protect what you have, reduce the damage, survive the transition, and that's necessary. But it's not the whole story. And I'd be doing you a disservice if I left you there, because defense alone doesn't build a future. It just delays a worse outcome. Here's what I mean. Every disruptive shift in the economy, without exception, creates a second category of person. Not the ones being replaced, and not even the ones adapting to survive, but the ones who look at the disruption itself and see an opening nobody else is looking at yet. I think about the people who sold typewriter ribbons in 1985. Most of them saw the personal computer as the enemy. A smaller number saw it as an opportunity to become the person who taught small businesses how to use the new machines, and made a very good living doing exactly that for the next 15 years. Until the next shift came along, and they adapted again, because by then adapting was simply who they'd become. The pattern repeats every single time, and it's repeating right now, quietly, while most people are too busy being afraid to notice it. Somebody is going to become the person small businesses in your town call when they need to understand what AI actually means for their operation. Without the tech jargon, without the hype, just plain honest guidance from someone who's lived long enough to translate complicated things into simple ones. Somebody is going to become the person who audits these systems for errors and bias, because every company adopting this technology quickly discovers it makes confident mistakes. And confident mistakes need a human who knows the difference between confidence and correctness. Somebody is going to become the trusted advisor who helps people your age, specifically, navigate exactly the conversation we're having right now, because that need is only going to grow. I'm not telling you this to add another item to your worry list. I'm telling you because somebody is going to fill those roles in your community, in your industry, in the exact niche you already understand better than almost anyone 25 years younger than you. There is no rule that says it can't be you. The only thing standing between you and that version of the story is the same thing that's been standing there the whole video. Whether you decide tonight that this is a beginning instead of an ending. Not because I'm telling you to feel that way. Because the evidence, if you look at it honestly, actually supports it. Every skill we talked about, the judgment, the trust, the ability to read a room, those don't disappear at 50. They deepen. The market is about to need exactly what decades gave you, in a form it's never needed quite this urgently before. Let's go back to where we started tonight. You, in the car, in the driveway, not able to walk inside yet. I want you to picture that same driveway, but months from now. Not a fantasy version where everything worked out perfectly and the fear never comes back. That's not how any of this actually goes, and you'd know I was lying if I told you it was. I mean a real version. You, a little older, a little wiser about exactly how fragile the old story was, sitting in that same car. And this time you walk inside differently, not because the fear is gone, because you know something you didn't know before. You know your runway. You know your real numbers. You know the 3 stories about your own judgment that you can tell without shrinking. You know the 6 steps in order if the ground ever moves again. And you know that somewhere in your town, in your field, there's a version of you that became the person people call when the new thing gets confusing. Because you didn't run from it. You learned to stand next to it. That version of you isn't guaranteed. I won't stand here and promise you a happy ending, because I don't know your specific circumstances, your health, your debts, the particular weight of what you're carrying. What I do know is this: the people who come out of disruption stronger are almost never the smartest ones in the room, and they're almost never the youngest. They're the ones who stopped waiting to feel ready and started moving while they were still scared. Fear and action were never opposites. You can carry both at the same time. Most of the people you admire most were doing exactly that the whole time, and just never told you. I think about how much of my own life has been exactly that. Carrying the fear and the action together, at the same time, in the same hand. Every real decision I've ever made that changed something for the better was made while I was still scared. Not after the fear passed. The fear never fully passes. You just get more practiced at moving with it instead of waiting for it to leave first. Nobody tells you that part when you're younger. They make it sound like confidence comes before the leap. In my experience, it's almost always the other way around. The confidence shows up afterward, as proof that you survived, not as permission beforehand. Robert didn't feel ready. The people who reinvented themselves after every wave of disruption before this one didn't feel ready either. Readiness is not a feeling that arrives before you start. It's something you build in motion, one honest step after another, usually while your hands are still shaking a little. So here's what I'd ask of you. If you've made it all the way to this point in the video, and I think that says something about the kind of person you are, go back through what we talked about tonight and pick one thing. Just one. Not all 6 steps. Not a total life overhaul starting tomorrow morning. One thing. Maybe it's finally calculating your real runway instead of guessing at it. Maybe it's opening that retirement statement you've been avoiding. Maybe it's simply writing down the 3 stories that prove your judgment is worth more than you've been charging for it. Pick the one that scares you the least and do it this week before the fear has a chance to talk you out of it again. Small, honest action, repeated, is the only thing that has ever reliably turned fear into something usable. If this conversation meant something to you tonight, subscribe to the channel and share it with 5 people who need to hear it as much as you did. A sibling, a coworker, a friend who's been quietly carrying the same fear alone, thinking they're the only one. You'd be surprised how many people are sitting in their own version of that driveway right now, waiting for someone to tell them the truth instead of a slogan. Leave a comment, an honest one, about where you actually are tonight. Not a performance. Not what you think I want to hear. What's really true for you right now. And tell me what you want me to cover next. Because these conversations only get sharper when they come from what's actually keeping you up, not from what I assume it is. You didn't build the life you have by accident. You built it one decision at a time, through years nobody was watching, years that never made it into a highlight reel, that no one ever congratulated you for. This is just one more decision, in a life full of them. And you already know how to make those. You've been making hard, quiet decisions since long before artificial intelligence had a name, and you'll go on making them long after this particular fear has become just another chapter you got through. I'll see you in the next one.